something that I'm really taking away from Rachel during our conversation is this perspective of trying to look at challenge as something beautiful. As someone that has struggled with a fixed mindset for a majority of my life, being able to look at challenges not as something that defines how untalented I am in an area, as opposed to something like a challenge, something beautiful that I can test my mettle against. Like, yeah, this is tough as hell for me, but I'm freaking tough and I'm going to make it through. This is a podcast for an audience of one, myself. But if you're here, I'm glad you're here. I hope you take something from it. I feel like the term self love, though, can be like really misinterpreted, misused. I feel like a lot of people will use the term, oh, like this is self love, to then eat 3 sleeves of Oreos or to, do whatever. So, I'd love to like start, like, let's just like define terms for you, Rachel. What is the meaning of self love?
Yeah. Well, obviously, eating 3 sleeves of Oreos is not a very loving thing to
Sure,
do,
sure.
not for your body or your liver or whatever. Um, yeah. So I refer to myself as a self specialist. So self love is really important, but we really should not necessarily talk about the definition of self love, but the definition of love,
Mm.
itself. What does it mean to love anything or anyone? And the way that I see it is that the everything that exists in creation comes from love, right? Even the creation of the universe, there was a loving act to create, and even it's a loving act to destroy things that aren't serving anymore. So when we talk about self-love, we're talking about treating yourself as the divine being that you are, as we all are, so to love yourself means in many ways to love everything, including yourself. So it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop with, oh, I love myself, it's all about me, it's about my happiness and my joy. That's too narrow, because that's not what we're talking about. When we truly love ourselves, one thing we know about love is that there's no cap on it. There's no one who's just had enough love. It just kind of stops right here. The more love we generate, the more love comes. So when we love ourselves, we fill up with enough love to give out to everything and everyone around us. And that's what we're talking about. Being the best human being you can be, so you can go out into the world and share your light with other people.
Best is a really, really subjective term. Do you think it's up to the individual to define their best self, or do you think there are some like just universal laws that like where there's this nature versus nurture? Do you think like half of the definition of best probably applies fairly generally to the entire population, for for example, fitness, flexibility, staying high, things like that? Or
Mhm.
is best something that is completely subjective to the individual?
I believe it's subjective to the individual. I think How do you know when you're at your best self? Because you feel good, you feel clean and clear. You're not being passive aggressive or bitter, or you're not feeling at the mercy of your emotions. That you understand we all have various emotions, and it's okay to feel what we feel, and we're gentle with ourselves, and that's going to look different for every person. Our physical bodies are just that. We're much bigger than that. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. You can be your best self and be 300 pounds if you want to. It doesn't, if that's what feels right to you, then that's exactly what you're supposed to be. What matters is how you feel about yourself and how much you're giving back of your wonderful self to the rest of the world.
Yeah. I wonder though, because I hear that. Um, do you think there's, I feel like I do see some people, I've seen this in myself, where I tell myself I'm doing great, but it's because I'm actually lying to myself to a certain degree.
Yeah.
How do you feel that someone breaks through that, that form of self-deception, right? I feel like I know I do this, I'm guilty of this, I've caught myself doing this. Like I lie there's no one I lie more to than myself.
Mhm.
I firmly believe that. So, how do you think? How does that self deception play a role? We could say, "Oh yeah, I feel great after playing 5 hours of video games," but then I don't know if I am brutally honest. Like, I don't feel great about that. So, how do you think
Yeah.
someone breaks through that self deception to actually get to the realness of, am I actually doing good? Or am I
Mhm.
just distracted from the mess, the messy room, the messy closet that, I don't want to pay attention to?
Right. So part of it is acceptance. What you just said, I feel great after playing 5 hours of video games, but do I really? Both can exist. You might feel great. You had a good time. Hooray. I got to, play with people, talk to it, it was fun being competitive. That's real.
Mm,
Now, the other part of it comes in and says, but I should be cleaning out my closet, or I want to be able to do that. And I just realized I totally procrastinated and didn't do that thing. And now I don't feel so good about that. That's real too. But being gentle with yourself about it. Hey, Andrew, I'm glad you had a good time. And that's great. Own that because it was fun and life is supposed to be fun. So, what's stopping you? You can ask questions. What's stopping you from cleaning the closet out? I don't want to clean it out. Okay, well, what can we do that you could maybe do some of it instead of the whole thing? Can we do a shelf today? And you slice it thinner so that and you turn it into a game. You turn it into it. Think about how great you're going to feel if you just do one shelf today. Let's do one shelf. Let's empty one box, right? Then you're being gentle with yourself and you're accepting yourself, and that's what's different, is that you're not shoulding on yourself. I should do this, I should do that, right? You're saying, hey, I appreciate the fact that I gave myself some time to unwind. I clearly needed to. Good for me. Now let's get to the other stuff we need to do, and let's find out a way that we can do that where it doesn't feel like a huge task. Let's work together on this. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah,
it's not so black and white, good and bad,
sure.
right?
This is what you're talking about right here. I am particularly dreadful at. Um, I I'm extremely conscientious.
Hmm.
Um, Not only through personal experiences, but also going to therapy on my own. Like, people have helped me realize, um, I don't need anyone else to critique me,
Hmm.
because I promise you, if I even say once during this interview, if like I will think about that
Hmm.
maniacally
Right.
for hours, if not days. And
Right.
it's a real disease. Like,
Hmm.
it doesn't feel good. Um, there it is. Shit, I'm gonna think about it all day now. But so
No,
my
no, not after this interview. You won't.
no, not after this interview. I want exactly. But I- how do I fight that?
Okay.
I've
Yeah. Well,
I've
it's that
really
verb.
there's definitely been times where times, maybe like a couple hours a day at most, that I've been really good at having that self talk of, you're good. Like, it's okay.
Hmm.
Take a breath, clean the closet, put up one shelf, clean one drawer, clean for 1 minute. And it's miraculous what happens. Like, I have the goal to clean for 1 minute, but then I clean for an hour just because I started, and starting is the hardest part.
That always the way.
Yeah.
Do you know, growing up, same as you, I would ruminate over like every little mistake I made. And also, my biggest motivating mantra was, I can't do it. That was a motivator for me. I can't do that. And then my mind would go, oh, well, now I have to prove myself wrong. Right? So now I would go and do it. So now I laugh about it whenever I say, oh, but you can't do that. And I'll go like, oh, great. That means now I'm going to do it. So you, again, being playful with yourself, being gentle and accepting of yourself. So when you're going to like kick your butt over saying, there we have to really look at, and I used to do the same thing. So one of the things that we do is we look at whose voice is that, whose voice is the one telling you, oh, you messed up, and you're no good, and you got to go practice longer or whatever. You're not where you need to be because it's not your voice. It's not yours. When you were born, you didn't think that way. When we're all born, we're perfect beings. All we need is someone to hug us and feed us and change our diaper and cuddle, with all those things. But somewhere down the line, we receive a message that who we are isn't good enough. And it may be from parents, it may be from caregivers, it may be from teachers. We don't even know. Maybe from other kids. Where did you get the message that you had to be perfect? That's the voice that you need to address, because it is not Andrew's voice. Andrew's voice is the one that you just described. You're good. Let's go do a shelf. Let's clean for a minute. It's all good, man. We're just doing our thing on the earth. Okay, fine. Let's have a good time at it.
Yeah.
That's Andrew. That's the voice you listen to. But the other one, that's not you.
Something, and again, this is through a lot of self reflection. For me, it actually comes back to school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was blessed through my parents, through whatever, with a certain level of intelligence that allowed me to get really, really good grades in school
Mm-hmm.
without doing a lick of homework ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Sounds like my son.
frustrating, huh?
Yeah.
But I got a lot of praise when I did well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the lesson I learned was like, if you're putting in effort, you're not talented.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
can get the good grades without studying. Good for you. Here's your praise, young
Right.
Andrew. But
Right.
now, now that I've entered life, real adult life, and see the things that I really, really want to be good at,
Mm-hmm.
there's something inside of me that says, if you don't make a viral TikTok, if you don't make a viral podcast, every time you make a podcast without that much effort, you're a
Mm-hmm.
failure.
Right. Right. Because the bar was set so high. Right. And so your responsibility, especially as a father,
Mm,
you don't want your kids to go through that. So the buck has to stop with you.
yeah.
So, and that's the same thing. As I was joking about it, but it's true. My son happens to be very much like you. He does his homework, but he's a very good student. I had to work a little harder. But one of the things that, and there have been studies done about this too, when children receive praise for doing something that it seemed natural to them, right? So they become afraid of making a mistake. They're afraid of losing the status of being the smart, great kid. So when we praise our children, when you praise your kids, to say something like, I'm very proud of you for putting in the effort to do that. I'm very proud. Well, but I didn't. It just came naturally to me. It's like, well, you know what? You didn't know that information until it was taught to you. And you paid attention and you received what the teacher was telling you. For some kids it's easier, for some kids it's a little harder, but that's okay. But you paid attention, and that took effort.
Mm,
So you really break it down. You didn't just slide through life. You had to be paying attention. If you were on your phone or doing a crossword or whatever, you wouldn't have been as good, right? In one way or another. Maybe. But the point is, we all have lessons that we're learning in this life. And so if public school wasn't your challenge, something else will be. How beautiful. You get to go deeper in another area, right? But it doesn't mean you have to be the A+ student you were in school, because the true successful people in the world learn through failure. That's important to absorb. We don't get better unless we mess up. That's how we learn. Think about a maze going, sorry, a mouse going through a maze, right? Are they idiots because they hit a wall? No. you know, they maybe if they just decided to give up and fall asleep, but the point is they have to learn, oh, okay, that's a dead end. Now I go through this way. This is what our brains are doing all the time. So your challenge might not have been school, but your challenge might be something else. It might be something spiritual. It might be being a parent. It might be being a podcaster. That's beautiful
Mm,
because that means you have a much more enriched life. Your challenge came later in life. Great.
yeah.
Okay. And so what a beautiful blessing to be a human being in your life, getting to learn new things. That's the reframe. It's not doing well all the time because you started out that way. It's about what challenges can I present to myself so that I'm a beautiful failure and I learn from that failure and I get better. Does that make sense?
I love that. I love it. And it's such a, and it's just the way you look at it, right? It's just kind of a perspective switch of like, damn, this is hard to, yeah, I get to dive deep and like really test my metal to a degree.
Yes. Yeah, and
Um,
then you start going, "Bring it on. I want more challenges,"
yeah,
because you wanna get stronger and stronger. It's just like when you work out, right? You start out and your muscle mass isn't that big and it hurts and you're pumping. And then obviously what happens? You're deadlifting 110 pounds, then you're deadlifting 150 pounds, and then you go on 250, whatever.
yeah.
But that's the whole point. You go low and slow when you work out, right? Low weight, go slowly, and you slowly get stronger. It's the same
Mm.
thing in life.
That's ah. And then you're at a point where, like I am, where you're addicted to the pain to some degree.
To some extent. If you want to call it pain, then it's almost like fun, right?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's uncomfortable, and that's so interesting. I feel like there are so many parallels to the body and the mind,
Oh
and I'm
yeah.
constantly awakened to things like this. Like when I first started working out 7 8 years ago, yeah, it was exactly that. Like it's like, oof, this sucks, and now it's like, oh yeah, like
Yeah.
gritty workout, let's go. Like
Yeah.
that's super interesting. And then in the you mentioned the study with the kids, and I can't remember which book. I feel like I've read that in. It was either Mindset by Carol Dweck or Grit by Angela Duckworth, in
Mhm.
which they talk about that.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's
So
very important.
you mentioned this spirit, this aspect of spirituality, and again,
Mhm.
like spirituality kind of impossible to define, but how would you define spirituality? In as someone that's rather like agnostic myself, I actually still believe in this, at least the concept of spirituality, that there is something, like we're more than just an animal, right? That's
Mhm.
that's evolved to conquer the world, right? So could you define spirituality for me and the role that you feel um it plays in the human self-development?
Sure. I mean, spirituality is our essence, and it's the essence that is connected to all other essences. So we may call it great spirit or great mystery or God or
Mm,
Godhead or whatever it is, great the collective consciousness, whatever it is. It's the thing that makes us who we are, that infuses us with our own individual life, right? So, and we all have it, and animals have it, right? So, what's the difference between, a leaf that's beautiful on a tree and green and when it's fallen off the tree and it's brown, and it's quote unquote dead, right? So, um, the difference is its life essence is not present anymore. So this essence that each one of us has is part of the greater mystery, the greater essence of all things. So my spiritual practice is shamanism. So in that belief system, everything has a spirit. Everything, even non-sentient beings. I'm holding up my pen right now, right? So it's like my pen has its own spirit in its own way. Why? Because and now I'm also a science geek, so I like to cross spirituality and science because of quantum physics. Everything is vibrating energy, everything, right? So high vibration, low vibration, things that are physical to us vibrates low, at a low vibrational frequency, which is why we can feel them tangibly. The light or sound vibrates very quickly. We can't see it, we can't touch it. Well, this is the same thing with our spirits. We vibrate very high. So it's not something we can see, but once we are poured into our little meat suit here, we can animate that with the essence of who we are, and we all have it. And when it leaves, this is science again too, energy never dies, it just changes form. So our energy returns to the collective consciousness, whatever it is, and reforms itself into something else. So it's just this great big cycle. So, what you believe in um, is fine, whatever it is you believe in, whether there's a God or there isn't a God. But what we know is that there's a lot we can't explain. And science is doing a great job trying to catch up with all the stuff we can't explain. But we do know that much. We do know that, there is some life force that moves through all of us. And that's what I would consider the spirit to be, that our connection to the divine meaning creation, the source of life.
As someone, so although I'm rather agnostic now, Rachel, I grew up part of the LDS faith,
Hmm.
and Mormons, as they're
Yeah.
often referred to as, right. And so I think when I decided to something something that was dangerous for me, I think psychologically, was this idea of suppressing anything that even had a whiff of malicious. Um,
Hmm.
it like you were only pure, and well, actually, you should only strive to be pure. And I think the scriptures were, scriptures are pretty blatant, like we're worthless essentially, and we're only saved by the grace of Christ. And I'm not trying to mock for anyone that does believe that, but something that for me was pretty dangerous about that was, one, this reinforcement that I'm not good enough, at least for me.
Hmm.
You know, um,
Yeah.
that that even if I did put in the effort, my efforts would never be enough. And so I
Right.
think that was something else that for me was dangerous. But I think, and then another side to this was kind of this suppression. It's not necessarily a suppression of masculinity per se, but there definitely was some suppression of, I mean, for me, it manifests as, for me, I define it as masculinity, the drive, the aggression, the go get itness. I felt like I always had to force myself to be timid, meek, mild, but that's not who I actually am. And so now that I'm still kind of unraveling this whole thing for myself personally, but I think spirituality tends to have this kind of woo woo, oh, it's all peace and love and all that. But then there's this other side that for me has been, I kind of do need to embrace a little bit more of, like, the monster. I'm not explaining myself very well, but does this
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
okay? And is that still working on spirituality? Because I think there's going to be a lot of men, especially, that listen to this and are like, I don't need to be more spiritual. But for me, like, getting in touch with the, you know, that part of myself that is an animal has actually been extremely fulfilling, extremely
Of course.
enlightening, and it's led
Yeah.
me to be a better father and husband. So could you talk about that, like, to the men out there that are hearing, oh, spirituality,
Yeah.
like it doesn't have to be. I think spirituality tends to have a feminine context, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Very interesting, though, that the Judeo-Christian God is a man. So,
sure,
you know what I mean? So,
sure,
but spirituality is female? I don't know. So,
yeah, no, there's definitely, it definitely doesn't make sense for sure.
no, it doesn't. And so yeah, so let's talk about that. But there are a couple things. When you were talking about embracing the monster, right? Men have had a lot of pressure on them, a lot of pressure. And I know as a woman saying that today, ooh, it's like it's all about women and women's power. And I do believe in that for sure. Men have been shortchanged for a very long time, especially in the area of rites of passage. Men have not learned how to access the divine masculine. They've learned that masculinity means shutting your emotions off, being a brute, being strong. And that is why we have wars. And that is why we have rape of women. You understand? Because
Mm.
men don't know what to do with their power, which is divine. Men have such an important role in life. The divine masculine is really, and I encourage men and women who are listening to this, look up the divine masculine, look up what the power really is about. It's not just about physical prowess, right? It's about groundedness. It's about that warrior spirit. And what does the warrior spirit mean? The warrior spirit knows when to be gentle in a strong way and when to be fierce in a strong way.
Mm.
When and so it's very important. Men don't have the rites of passage that they did in our culture, and some cultures, thank goodness, still do have them. But it's really important for men to understand the sacredness of stepping into adult male life and their responsibility, not just to women or children, but to themselves and each other, right? If men could be grounded in truly who they are and the power that they have that's connected to source, as we are all connected to source, there wouldn't be so much need to flex the muscles and buy the things and the flashy toys and the guns and show power in an outward way, because just being who you are, just being that wonderful man that you are, is enough. You can do so much good by training your children to be good human beings, whether they're male or female, by being a good partner to your partner, whether male or female, right? So it's really important for men to understand they are needed, they are valid, they are strong and amazing. We need that balance of the masculine and the feminine. We're supposed to be working together, right? At our best. So that takes me to the other part. Within each individual, we also have a masculine and feminine side. We were talking about Carl Jung, before we started. Carl Jung talks about the anima and the animus. We need to have a marriage of the masculine and feminine within us.
That's the
When
yin
we go,
yang, right?
that's right. That's
It's not
absolutely right.
just about
It's not
people,
just
it's
about
about the
equality.
individual.
That's right. And it's energetic, and that's spiritual too, right? To understand, and what's the yin yang anyway? We see a little bit of white in the dark and a little bit of dark or white in the black and black in the white, because they are connected, because there is always a balance. So when we talk about Carl Jung, we talk about the shadow.
Mm.
Men who suppress their feminine side and go like, oh, spirituality is woo woo, it's girl stuff. Now you've created a shadow aspect that any time you show your gentleness, you're showing weakness. That's the problem. That's why we have war. That's why we have violence, because it's not okay to cry. It's not okay to have feelings, because you're supposed to put this outward view of strong masculinity. That's not what it means to be strong. Okay, so the monster within you and the monster within all of us, we need to take that monster out and play with that monster a little bit, or else it becomes part of our shadow, and the shadow will take over and do nasty things, right? So what the reason you feel good when you access that darker part of yourself is because you are letting it be. You're accepting it for who it is. You're not judging yourself for having a dark side. We all have a dark side, right? The problem becomes when we suppress it. So by giving it a nice place to play, so that might be, whether that's exercise, working out, physical sports, doing something active with your body, camping in the woods alone or with a bunch of guys,
So good.
right?
So
So
good.
good, because you let your animal come out, and we need that. And women need that too, by the way. And it isn't just about like, let's get together and knit. It's about let's go howl at the moon naked. I mean, we're powerful people too, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So we all have the animal within us. And that's what's so beautiful is we get to experience as human beings what it's like to be human and what it's like to be spiritual at the same time. I hope that covers it.
No, I love that. One of my favorite expressions is actually what you resist persists, and what
Yeah.
you embrace erase.
Hmm.
And it's it is that idea, right? If you don't accept and acknowledge, um, like, the problem generally only gets worse.
Right.
There's a children's book called "There's No Such Thing as a Dragon" that I often read to my son. um, Dragon randomly appears in this kid's bedroom, and he pets the dragon. He goes to tell his mom about it, and well, there's no such thing as a dragon. And throughout the story, the more this dragon gets ignored, the larger it gets.
Of
And it
course.
and at some point, it fills the house. It's wearing the house like a turtle shell, and a bakery truck passes by and off goes the house. And it's not until the son says, "No, mom, dad, like, there is a dragon," and pets it on the head, does it kind of shrink back down to size.
Right. Patting it on the head. And that's an act of love,
Mm,
right? We talked about love earlier. That's what it's about is acceptance. Acceptance is love. Creation is love. You know, looking at something that might be scary in the face is an act of love. And that's what we all need as human beings, male, female, otherwise. We all need to be loved. And we all need to be heard and accepted for who we are at the core of everything.
yeah.
That's a beautiful story. I wish I'd known about that when my son was young.
Billion, or yeah, there's no such thing as, by Bill Kent, I think, is the author. But
It's a
um,
great one.
so, Rachel, I'd love to ask about, um, mainly because I go through this a lot, and it takes some serious self reflection to fix. I think a lot of people feel that something's missing.
Hmm.
They feel anxious, depressed. They feel that hole within themselves, but they don't like. It's hard to find out where to start. I feel like it's
Yeah.
hard to know. Okay, like, even if you do, even if, like, you're anxious about something, it's one thing to be like, okay, I feel anxious. It's okay, but what do you do when you don't know what to do?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's a big question,
Yeah.
and in the moment when you're feeling anxious, it's best to just drop into your body and just like that dragon, pet the anxiety on the head.
Mm,
I accept you. I accept that you're here. Usually what happens is it tends to dissipate because you're paying attention to it. You're looking at it in the eye. You're saying, I understand whatever. I don't even know why I'm anxious right now, but I'm feeling the anxiety. I'm going to look it in the eye. I'm going to say, okay. And there are meditations. I teach my patients this meditation that really helps with anxiety or negative feelings. That's in the moment. But
yeah.
if it's something that you experience on a regular basis, I can't encourage people enough to get into counseling or therapy. With my practice, if people are dealing with something very specific, I ask that they even consider just coming for one session, which is kind of rare. You don't hear that from therapists a lot. They think, okay, we're going to start therapy and you're going to be in therapy till you get better. I say if you're ambivalent about therapy, you want to try a session or two, call me. We'll set something up. It's better to try something, even we could do something in 45 to 50 minutes than not, you know? So, and if you want to continue, great. But sometimes anxiety comes from past wounding that needs to be addressed. So you can manage it in the moment, but if you want it to stop over time, you really need to do the work to find out where it's originally coming from. So therapy is really good for that.
Do you think anxiety always comes, like, and I'm not discrediting, like, there are absolutely, like, some people's brains are just chemically imbalanced. Like, that's a real thing. And so I'm not discrediting that at all, but maybe just for general anxiety outside of the, medical like legitimacies. Do you think all anxiety comes from it always roots from something?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I
Okay.
mean, because we're not born anxious,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
Take it back to the beginning. We're not born that way. We're not designed to be that way. We have these big brains, and we take in a lot of information, and it's oftentimes very difficult to process that information. And we're getting mixed messages from all over the place, from media, from parents, from teachers, from friends, from colleagues. It's very hard to sort through it all. So yeah, and it is a slippery slope. About some people are just chemically, there is a new study that just came out that kind of looks at that in a more critical way. Are there
Interesting.
people who are really chemically unable to process, maybe to some extent,
Mm,
but there's a much larger movement now saying that what feels like a chemical imbalance is really trauma that needs to be addressed.
mm,
And again, in a loving and careful way. Because we know about neuroplasticity. We can retrain our brains to think
yeah.
differently, to feel differently. So somewhere in between there is the truth, you know?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Funny how the truth is always seems to be in the middle, right?
Yes. It always is.
It's never at the polar extremes. It is
No, that's the
always,
Taoist
always, always in the middle.
way, the middle way, the middle way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of your work, there's a big question. Do we really need to love ourselves before we love others?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you do
Mhm.
personally, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, again, I like to go back to the baby thing. Can you love your mom before you love yourself? Do you even know what yourself is? I mean, we don't even know who our sense of self is, right? So
Mm,
do we love our caretakers? Yes, you can love, we all have the capacity to love.
mm,
But I don't think that's the question you're asking. I think the question you're asking is, can we be in relational love with other people if we don't love ourselves? And I think that in that way, we do need to love ourselves, because that where is the love coming from, right? Again, we talked about this earlier. So we have to refill our tank. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to love who we are so that the love we give is genuine to others, right? So is it possible to love others without loving yourself? Yeah, but I think what we're talking about here is not loving yourself. So a baby doesn't know whether to love itself or not. It just exists. And in that state, it is pure.
mm,
When we get older, when we think, well, I don't care too much for myself, but I love a whole bunch of other people. Like I don't give myself as much of a break as I give everybody else. That's not self-love, right? Clearly. So in that regard, yes, you do, to truly effectively love other people, that love belongs to you as well. I call it like, you're having a party and you're filling everybody's glass with an empty pitcher, you know? Fill that pitcher up with love, and then the love that you give is the pure, true elixir of love.
yeah. Um, my wife and I are generally on the same page on this topic now, but when we first got married, I used the same analogy a lot. Like,
Mhm.
hey, like let me let me let me love you from the overflow of my cup.
Mhm.
Whereas I felt, and it was largely self-imposed, as we've discovered and as we've gone on in our relationship. But and so we're at a good place now. But what if the person you love isn't on the same page as you in that aspect? What, not necessarily how do you convince, but like how do you have that conversation? How do you get on the same page with a spouse, significant other, whatever it may be?
Right. So, and you may not be able to get on the same page. That's the
Mm,
first understand. Remember, in all relationships, there are two individuals who have chosen to be together. You don't ever stop being your individual self. You can enrich your individual self through the relationship. But when we look at each of us, you know, when we first meet a partner, we weren't thinking about them as part of us. We fell in love with who they are as an individual. And that's not going to go away. They're still an individual. They're still here to learn whatever lessons they need to learn. They're still on their own journey, their own path. So the best relationships is when we honor our partner as an individual going through whatever they're going through. What is it that's keeping you together? Where are the areas, the touch points of commonality between you that keeps you together? Those are the things you capitalize on. So they may not be where you are on your spiritual path. They may not even be interested in a spiritual path, but you love them for something else. And that's okay, as long as everybody is able to say, I respect you for where you are, then there's no conflict. A lot of problems I see when I work with couples is they want to be on the same page at the exact same point on the path so that they can share the experience
Yeah.
together. But that isn't always how it is. It may take decades for someone to say, it's time for me to wake up in this area. You know, so it's really about looking at your partner and saying, I love this person for exactly who they are. We talked about this earlier. It's about love, it's about acceptance, it's about listening to each other and honoring wherever your partner is on their path, you know.
Love that.
So you're not sort of in competition with each other or expecting your partner to be exactly where you are.
Yeah. For us, definitely a lot of it came from me, mainly because I think of how conscientious I am.
Hmm.
Because I'm so aware of where I lack. I'm
Hmm.
constantly trying to fix myself in some way, right? And so it was just coming to the understanding that just like we're just wired differently, and like that's okay, and it's beautiful because we still love each other despite
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
um but uh but
You're just responsible. We're all just responsible for our own
yeah,
lessons and journey. Mhm.
100%. Rachel, where can people find more about you? Where can they access you? They live in New York, they love everything you've said, they want to book a session. Where can people find you? And we'll link everything in the show notes.
Yeah. So anyone can reach me at my website, which is rachelastaretherapy.com. So it's just my name with the word therapy after it.com. And if anyone's interested to listen to my podcast, that's called Self Talk with Rachel Astarte, and it's anywhere you find podcasts. But if you want to reach me directly, best place to do it is through my website, rachelastaretherapy.com.
Okay. Love it. Rachel, thank you. This has been enlightening. I am absolutely walking away with something. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Yeah.